What's up and welcome to my review of the MSI GS66 Stealth. This is an ultra portable, high performance gaming laptop that comes at a premium price, but it does include a number of premium features that you don't get in some of the cheaper models out there. So today we're going to talk about who might want to really buy this laptop and who will probably want to skip this laptop and opt for something else. Taking a look at the specs of the GS66, you can see that we've got an i7-10870H 8-core 16-thread Intel processor. Now, when you're just under a CPU load, you can get up to 65 watts of sustainable power through the CPU. Now, this is really impressive for such a thin and light machine. Now, when under a dual load stress test, you can get up to 60 watts of power on the CPU. And on the GPU, we've got an RTX 3070 Max Q that can go up to 95 watts when under a GPU only load and when under a dual CPU GPU load. With the CPU at 60 watts, the GPU can pull 78 watts at the same time. Overall, this TDP puts the GS66 firmly in the Max Q bracket of laptop where you're trying to get the most performance per pound of carry weight. Now for ports on this machine, we have 3 USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type A's. We've got a Thunderbolt 3 with power delivery charging, an HDMI 2.0 with 4K 60Hz support, a USB 3.2 Type C, and then of course we also have a headset port and an Ethernet port as well. Overall, the ports on this machine are quite nice. The only thing that's really missing is a full-size SD card slot, in my opinion. Now, this machine has a 1080p Full HD 300Hz, 306 nits, 92% sRGB, 74% Adobe RGB display, and I can tell you it is a joy to game on, especially if you enjoy competitive multiplayer titles like myself. Now we have 32 gigs of DDR4 3200 MHz RAM, a 1TB PCIe SSD with a second slot already open and ready to be upgraded. Now taking the bottom of the chassis off this machine can be quite annoying unless you have a suction cup to pull the chassis bottom off. This machine is exceptionally thin at 0.71 inches and only weighs 4.76 pounds as weighed by my scale. Now when I first saw the specs and the price point for the GS66 Stealth, I went, I don't really understand how MSI is expecting to sell this when you can get so much more performance for the money going for a higher TDP, thicker machine. But it turns out this is a surprisingly awesome laptop to play competitive multiplayer games on that tend to be more CPU bound because we have a very high TDP on the Intel CPU and we also have a MUX switch, and the combination of those two things put together results in some great frame rates in titles like CSGO, Fortnite, Call of Duty Warzone. So I think it's very important to not discount the performance of this machine just because of the specs versus the price point and the fact that this also has an Intel chip versus an AMD chip. Now before we continue, I gotta give a big shout out to ZTech PC who sent out this laptop for me to review. So as a thank you to them, I've included a link in the video description down below. ZTech PC did apply a Phobia Nano Grease CPU repaste job to this unit, which costs $80 something on their website if you want to add that upgrade. Now, Bob of all trades had a unit that was completely stock sent to him from ZTech PC, and we did a collaboration to see if the Phobia Nano Grease decreased the temperatures. We saw a significant reduction in temperatures for both the CPU and the GPU, but especially that power-hungry Intel CPU. So if you're someone that likes to maximize the potential performance of your laptop with a repaste job, but you don't want to do the hassle of it, ZTech PC does offer that service. Now, arguably the main reason to buy this machine is how thin and premium and light it is. This has an all metal chassis, like it is very firm and rigid overall, much better than most laptops out there. Now, overall, I like the hinge design. We've got a firm hinge here, and it's very stable on its placement. Now, the exterior of the laptop has no LEDs, and the logo on the back of the lid is also not lit up, allowing this machine to double in a business or schooling environment and look very professional at the same time. If you're not looking for a gamified system, this is a great option for you. Now, I did test the webcam, and it really wasn't that great. We had kind of a whining sound on the microphone, and when you turn the fans up to high, it gets really difficult to understand what you're saying. So this is me recording a video on the internal webcam on the GS66. The fans are on low right now. So I'm typing at the same time. And let me go ahead and turn the fans to maximum. This is the fans on maximum now, so you'll probably not want to have fans on maximum when you're using the webcam. Now, one great thing about this laptop is Windows Hello. Just like that, we're logged in. I absolutely love the keyboard layout on this machine, and the feel of the keys is also great. We've got dedicated home and page up, page down buttons. The backlighting is clear and bright and colorful. The trackpad itself works really well, has a great clicky feel to it, but it is exceptionally wide, so wide in fact that you might accidentally activate it with your right wrist. Now, I'm not going to do a deep dive into the performance of the GS66 in this review, but I will summarize it for you. I'll be posting a full detailed breakdown later on if you want to check that out. Now, for TimeSpy, we saw a 23.6% increase over the last generation with the 2070 Super Max Q. This is a nice gain in performance, and honestly not fully representative of the potential gain that you'll see in some other titles. So let's keep going. At 1926, this thing tops the charts on performance per pound, but I would expect laptops that are in the similar weight category but with a higher TDP to do even better than this. Now, when it comes to points per dollar, know that you're not getting a great bang for the buck on this machine, but instead you're investing in a lot of the premium features. Now, in Cinebench, this machine did quite well compared to some other Intel laptops, but it just depends on the power limits that the manufacturers set up. But the simple fact is the AMD Ryzen 5000 series will provide a lot more multi-core rendering performance out of the CPU if that is something that you need a lot of. So I really recommend this laptop only to people that are looking for a pure gaming experience in an ultra thin and light package. Now, in the 15 games that I benchmark and test, we were able to play every single game on Ultra settings, even with RTX on Ultra and DLSS on Quality, except for the new Flight Simulator, which averaged 27 FPS. Now, the GS66 was able to outperform the Strix G17 in CPU-bound games like Far Cry 5 and Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Now, this is partially because we have a mux switch and partially because these games are more optimized for Intel CPUs. In the CPU-bound titles, we saw very minimal performance gains over last year's model, but in the GPU-bound title Red Dead Redemption 2, we saw a 47.8% increase in the exact same test. That is a huge performance improvement from one generation to the next. In GPU-bound games like Cyberpunk 2077, we saw the Strix G17 pull ahead despite not having a mux switch. But in esports titles, we saw the GS66 crush the Strix G17 over and over again, and again, that's because the mux switch allows us to bypass Optimus and improve our CPU-bound game performance. Now, the GS66 has very good performance in CPU-bound games because it has a high TDP on the CPU, while at the same time having enough power to the GPU to really crank out great frame rates in titles like Fortnite, CSGO, Valorant, and Call of Duty Warzone. But the downside of this machine is because the TDP on the GPU is on the lower side, averaging 78 watts in a lot of the different games, sometimes boosting up to that 95 watt limit if the CPU is not very engaged. But the tricky part about the power limits on this device is that because it's an Intel CPU, it's very power hungry. Dynamic boost really can't boost the NVIDIA GPU up to that 95 watt power limit very often. Only in very GPU bound games will you see the power jump up on the GPU. Now, the new 2021 GS66 is a bit quieter than the 2020 model. I'm not sure if this is because of the Phobia nano grease or if this is something that MSI has done with the fans on the inside, but in the extreme performance profile, I saw a reduction by about 4 decibels, which is pretty impressive. But on max fans, I saw very similar noise levels. So it just depends on what power profile you're on. Now, my primary gripe with the fans is just the pitch that they have. They don't really have kind of a low whoosh sound. They've got more of a higher sound to them. Take a listen. Okay, so this is on extreme performance with cooler boost enabled. Now this is the extreme performance profile without cooler boost on. This is now on the balanced fan profile setting. Now this is silent mode. The fans are barely audible. Now, comparing these stress test numbers from the 2020 model to the 2021 model reveals that we have significantly better GPU temps while at the same time maintaining roughly the same CPU performance and also having lower overall fan noise, right? So that's a giant win in my book for the 2021 model. Now, the speakers on this machine can get quite loud at 80.3 decibels, but they're not the best overall quality in my opinion. The mids and highs seem a little bit muddled. Now, for battery life, I estimate between 8 and 9 hours on airplane mode. Web browsing, you're looking between 6 to 7 hours approximately, and Wi-Fi video, you're looking at 5 to 6 hours. But of course, this is going to vary a lot depending on how you set up and optimize your battery life experience. Now, there's obviously lots of great reasons to pick up a GS66, but why might you want to skip this machine? Arguably, the biggest reason to skip this machine is just that it's not competitively priced very well. At $23.99, you really have to value the premium features like Windows Hello, the all-metal chassis, and how thin and light it is in order to, I guess, truly take advantage of how much money you're spending on this device. You're getting a lot more bang for the buck if you buy a machine like the Zephyrus G15 or Aorus 15G instead of the 3070, and those machines cost less at the same time. Even taking a look at the GE66, I think it's going to provide more bang for the buck than the GS66. So if you do decide to buy this machine, I think you really got to take advantage of the fact that it's only 0.7 inches thick and it's so thin and light. You really got to love how thin and light this machine is if you want to spend the money on it. Because if you're willing to carry a laptop that is heavier, you can certainly get more performance for the money. Now, another downside of this device is that the Intel CPU does run hot. It's going to take up a lot of power and prevent NVIDIA Dynamic Boost from really pushing the RTX 3070 as high as it might be able to go. Another downside is that the fans on this machine really never turn off. You can always kind of hear them just barely. And when the fans ramp up, we have more of a high-pitched sound to them, which some people might find more annoying. So I would highly recommend using headphones if you're going to game on this laptop. Another downside is that the all-metal chassis really shows your fingerprints if you have oily fingers. Another obvious downside to this machine is that Intel is likely to release new laptop CPUs if you're the kind of person that wants to get the very best GPU and CPU combo. And if you really want to get Intel CPUs, you might just want to wait a couple more months and see what Intel offers. Overall, I think the GS66 is a great ultra-light, thin, and gaming laptop design. I just wish that it was priced more competitively. If it was marked down, say $200, I think it would be a lot easier to recommend to more people. And I think this laptop in particular caters really well to competitive esports players that want a MUX switch in their machine so that they can get the highest possible FPS in CPU-bound games. So can you buy an Intel laptop this year and be happy? You'll still see higher frame rates in some games with an Intel CPU. And it's not that you can't edit videos on an Intel CPU, you still can. It's just going to be a bit slower than a new Ryzen 5000 series. So the key really is if you go Intel, you just want to get it at the right price. Now, if you're looking for a laptop around this price point, I highly recommend checking out my spreadsheet to compare all the different models around this price point. There's a link in the video description down below if you want to check it out. Now, if you found this review helpful, smash that like button, and if you want to see more of my future tech videos, hit that subscribe button. I will see you in the next one. Brandon out.